The mess hall was full of noise. Metal trays clanged. Voices shouted over each other, and the smell of warm food filled the air. Workers from all across the galaxy, humans, lizard folk, insectoids, and more gathered to eat after long shifts. In the mines, but in the far corner, sitting on the cold floor, was a girl no one spoke to. She was small, with silver fur and glowing violet eyes. Her skin clung to her bones. Kana and her ribs showed through her thin clothes. She didn't have a tray, or a seat, or even a friend. Her name was unknown to most. They only called her Scrap Thing or Stray Cat. The others laughed when she picked up fallen bread. They joked about how long she would last without collapsing. "K-Cat Girl," someone shouted, throwing a half-eaten fruit across the room. It rolled to her side, but she didn't move. She only looked down, eyes wide, her hands clutching her thin knees. No one cared where she came from. Rumor said she was rescued from a slave shipwreck. The station commander allowed her to stay only because she could clean floors and vents. She never spoke, never asked for help, and never touched food unless no one was watching. But someone did watch her. His name was Jack. He was human, tall and quiet, a mechanic who worked in the engine room. He had seen war, hunger, and cruelty. But something about this girl struck him hard. Maybe it was her silence. Maybe it was the way her stomach growled, but her hands stayed still. Or maybe it was because no one else seemed to care. He noticed her every day, always sitting in that cute. Always sitting in that cute. It sat in that same corner, always alone. She never begged, never cried, just sat there like a ghost in the crowd. The other workers stepped over her like she was trash on the floor. One day, Jack brought his tray of food to an empty table near the far corner. He didn't look at her directly, but he placed a small piece of bread on the edge of his tray. He pushed the tray slightly toward her side, acting like he didn't care. The girl's ears twitched. Her eyes flicked up, unsure. She didn't move. Jack didn't speak. He just ate his food slowly, glancing her way from time to time after a long pause. The girl crawled forward, slowly, like an animal testing a trap. She took the bread in both hands and backed away again. She ate it fast, like someone afraid it might be stolen. Jack said nothing, but he returned the next day. And the next, each time he left something small, a slice of apple, a bit of meat. Even a warm boiled potato once. Each time she took it. Always silently. Always watching him with those big, tired eyes. One evening, Jack saw something different. Her shoulders shook, not from cold, but from quiet sobbing. A worker had kicked over her cleaning bucket, laughed, and walked away. The girl didn't fight back. She just sat on the floor, water soaking her clothes. Jack stood up from his table. He picked up her bucket, filled it again, and gently placed it in front of her. She didn't look up, but her hands trembled. Later that night, Jack found her curled beside a hot air pipe in the back hallway. No blanket. No pillow, just her small body pressed against the metal to stay warm. He hesitated for a moment, then quietly placed a folded cloth beside her, an old shirt he didn't need. The girl stared at the cloth, then at him, her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "Use it," Jack said softly. "You don't have to freeze." She nodded once, just once, and pulled the shirt around herself in the morning. Others laughed again when she passed. One worker said, "The cat's getting bold now. Maybe we should stop feeding it." Jack said nothing, but his eyes locked on the man with cold steel in them. The laughter stopped, just for a moment. Later in the mess hall, Jack sat at his usual spot. This time, when he placed food at the edge of his tray, he spoke quietly. "You can eat with me." The girl froze. Her hand stopped shaking. Her ears lowered. She looked at him like he was speaking another language. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, very slowly, she crawled closer, not to the table, but beside it. She picked up the food and ate with soft, careful bites. Her eyes never left his face, and for the first time since arriving at the station, she whispered a word, barely audible. "Thank you." Jack didn't smile, but he nodded. From that day forward, something had changed, and in the lonely corner of the mess hall, she was no longer invisible. Jack sat at the same table again, just like yesterday. His tray was full of meat roll, steamed vegetables, and a soft piece of bread. But this time he had an extra roll hidden under a napkin. He looked toward the corner where the alien girl used to sit, but she wasn't there. His heart sank for a moment. Maybe they had sent her away. Maybe someone hurt her again. He scanned the hall, his eyes searching every face, every shadow. Then he saw her. She was peeking from behind a wall, half hidden. Her eyes locked with his for a second, then quickly turned away. But her body didn't move. She just stood there, unsure, scared, and watching. Jack gently pulled the extra roll from under the napkin and placed it at the edge of the table. He didn't call her, didn't wave. He simply started eating, calm, quiet. Like before, slowly, carefully, she stepped out from her hiding spot. One small step at a time. Her feet made no sound. Her fur looked cleaner today, and the shirt Jack had given her was wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She reached the table, but didn't sit. She crouched beside it like she always did, and reached for the roll. Her hands were shaking. Jack stopped chewing and looked at her. "You don't have to sit on the floor," he said softly. "There's space here. Sit with me." The girl flinched like he had shouted. Her eyes widened. She looked around the room quickly, checking who might be watching, but Jack didn't care about them. "I don't bite," he added with a slight smirk. Very slowly, she pulled herself up onto the bench. Her feet didn't reach the ground, and she sat at the edge, ready to jump off if needed. But she sat. People started to notice. Whispers spread across the mess hall. Some pointed, some laughed. One man threw a used spoon in their direction. It clattered on the floor beside her. Jack didn't react. He kept eating. She held the roll in her hands like it was gold, nibbling tiny pieces with her sharp teeth. Her eyes never left his face. It was the first time she sat beside someone at a table, like a person. "What's your name?" Jack asked, keeping his voice low. She looked down, afraid. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "Tia." Jack repeated gently, "That's a nice name." She blinked like she didn't understand how kindness could sound so calm, so real. A loud voice called from a nearby table. "You dating your pet now, Jack?" Laughter followed, harsh and cold. Jack slowly turned his head. His eyes locked on the man who spoke. Jack didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes made the laughter stop. Ty looked down, clutching the half-eaten roll like someone might take it away. Her shoulders curled in like she wanted to vanish. "Don't listen to them," Jack said. "They only laugh when they're scared." "Scared of me?" she asked, voice small and unsure. "Scared of anything different?" Jack replied. "And you, TA, are something special." She blinked again. Her ears twitched, and for the first time, a tiny smile touched her lips. It wasn't much, but it was real. The rest of the meal passed in silence between them. But something had changed. She didn't crawl away afterward. Instead, she stayed beside him until the tray was empty, until he stood up. "Where do you sleep?" he asked her gently, near the warm pipes. She answered, "It's not cold there." "Not always." Jack didn't argue. He just nodded. "If you ever need help, you can knock on my door, section B12. It's always open." TA looked shocked. "You? Trust me." "I trust what I see," Jack said. "And what I see is someone who's been hurt too much." That night, she didn't knock on his door, but she sat outside it, curled against the wall. Using his old shirt as a blanket, Jack saw her through the small window, but he didn't disturb her. He let her be. quietly watching over her like a silent guard. The next day, in the mess hall, something strange happened when Jack arrived. Ty was already sitting at the table, waiting. Her hands were folded in her lap. And for the first time, her posture was calm. Jack sat down beside her without a word and handed her a tray, 2 apples, a meat strip, and warm bread. You got this for me, she asked in surprise. I told you, he said. You can eat with me. She smiled again, this time a little wider, and somewhere in the crowded hall, a few workers watched with quiet eyes, not laughing now, but thinking. Tia sat at the table beside Jack again. Her back was straighter now, her fur brushed and tied behind her head with a piece of string he had given her. Her hands were still thin, her eyes still large and careful. But something had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. Jack noticed how she began to speak in whispers. Not full sentences, but small words. Bread, thank you. Warm, little by little. She was learning to be around people again, but only with him. After a few quiet meals together, Jack asked gently, Do you remember your home? Thea looked down, her fingers traced circles on the table. She didn't speak for a while, but Jack waited. Finally, she whispered, I had a sister. Once. Jack nodded. What happened to her? Gone, she said, voice shaking. When? The ship crashed. They said she died. He didn't ask more. He knew the pain in her voice, the weight of memories too heavy to speak. He just let her sit beside him in peace. Other workers kept watching them, some with curiosity, some with disgust. A few even told Jack to stop babysitting the stray. One of the guards, a man named Leto, sneered as Jack passed. You think that thing's gonna thank you someday? It's just a beast in a sweater. Jack didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. His silence said enough. Later that day, Jack came back from his shift and found a surprise. Ty had cleaned his entire living quarters. The small room was spotless. His tools organized, his clothes folded. And sitting in the middle of the room was TA holding a broken cum device. I tried to fix, she said softly, but I broke it more. Jack smiled, sat down, and showed her how to fix the wires. Her eyes sparkled like a child seeing stars for the first time. She learned fast, asking small questions, nodding with every answer. That night, she curled up in the corner of his room without a word. Jack let her stay. He didn't see her as a guest or a burden. He saw her as someone who needed peace. In the days that followed, Ty changed more. She began helping in the lower sections of the station, carrying tools, handing out parts, sweeping quietly. Some workers ignored her, but others started to nod. A few even said thanks. She smiled back every time, nervous but trying. One morning, she walked into the mess hall without Jack. The first time, she stood in line, holding a small tray Jack had given her. She didn't look up at anyone, but she didn't shake either. A worker behind her muttered, Can't believe they let her eat here now. But no one pushed her. No. One threw food this time. Something had shifted in the air. Jack arrived and saw her sitting alone at their usual table. She had already gotten food for both of them, 2 trays neatly placed side by side. She looked up at him and smiled, not with fear, but with pride. I want to learn more, she said. To be useful, you already are, Jack said, but I'll teach you whatever I know. So he did. He taught her how to use tools, how to fix broken wires, how to clean engines safely. Thea was quick, careful, and eager. Her hands shook less now, and her voice grew stronger with every day. One night, while fixing a broken vent together, Jack asked, What's your full name? Thea paused, looking thoughtful. Thealana, she said quietly. But no one called me that since I was small. Well, Thealana, Jack said, smiling. It's a beautiful name. You should use it again. She smiled back, her eyes shining. Only you say it nice, back in the mess hall. Things weren't all peaceful. A group of rough workers, led by a man named Cray, didn't like what was happening. First, it's one alien at the table. Cray said, loud enough for others to hear. Next thing, they'll be running the station. Jack ignored him, but Tia heard. She lowered her ears, her hands stopped moving. Later, in private, she asked Jack, "Do I make things worse?" "No," Jack said firmly. "You make this place better. They just don't know it yet." That night, Tia sat outside Jack's room again. She looked up at the stars. Through a small ceiling window, her voice was soft when she spoke. "I want to be brave." "Like you? You already are," Jack replied. "You just don't see it yet." She reached out and gently touched his hand, not as a servant, not as a child, but as someone who had found safety in a place full of noise, fire, and machines. Tia's voice, once nothing more than a whisper in the dark, was beginning to grow. And though others still laughed behind their backs, her name, spoken softly by one human, was no longer a name in silence. The alarm blared across the mining station. Red lights flashing through the long steel corridors. Jack dropped the tool in his hand and ran, his boots thudding against the metal floor. Smoke was rising from the lower storage bay, and people were shouting over the comms, "Fire in bay for all workers, evacuate immediately." The voice crackled through the speakers. Tia was in that section. Jack's heart pounded harder than ever before. He raced down the stairwell, pushing past others who were running the opposite way. Some shouted at him to stop, but he didn't. Listen, the heat grew stronger as he reached the lower deck. Smoke curled around the corners like dark fingers reaching out inside the storage bay. Fire danced along crates and equipment, filling the room with choking black smoke. Workers scrambled to escape, pulling each other toward the emergency exits, but in the chaos, one small voice cried out, "Help! He's stuck! Please!" It was T.I. Jack pushed through the smoke, coughing, eyes burning. He found her near the far wall, struggling to pull a young boy out from under a fallen storage unit. The boy's leg was trapped beneath it, and the fire was getting closer. "Ty!" Jack shouted, rushing to her side. She looked up at him, her fur singed, her eyes wide with fear, but still full of determination. She didn't move away. She didn't let go of the boy's arm. Together, Jack and T.A. lifted the heavy unit. It had groaned and scraped against the floor, but finally tipped just enough to free the boy. Ty pulled him out and carried him over her shoulders like he weighed nothing. Jack led the way, shielding them both from the flames. The smoke grew thicker, and the heat pressed on their skin like iron. But they didn't stop. At last, they burst through the emergency door just as it sealed shut behind them. Alarms still rang, but the corridor was safe. The boy was coughing, crying but alive. Other workers gathered, stunned to see T.A. dragging the boy to safety. His name was Malik, a junior engineer, barely 13 years old. Malik's mother ran to him, tears falling as she pulled him into her arms. Then she turned to Tia, looking at her not with fear, but with awe. You saved him," she said. Tia stepped back, unsure how to respond. Her eyes lowered, her body tense, but the woman reached forward and gently touched her arm. "Thank you," she whispered. Others watched from a distance, murmuring something. Heads shifted again, but not everyone was pleased. Later that evening, while the fire crew cleared the damage, the station leader held a meeting in the control room. Jack stood beside T.A., arms crossed, listening with cold anger in his eyes. "She doesn't belong here," said a tall officer named Bren. "The fire started in her section. We don't know what she touched, what she broke. She's untrained and unsupervised." Jack stepped forward. "She saved a life. Does that not matter?" "She shouldn't have been in there to begin with," Bren snapped. "She's not registered, not certified, and definitely not protected by any contract." T.A. stood silent, her hands clenched tightly. Her eyes darted between the people in the room, some glaring, some avoiding her gaze. Then, Malik limped forward with his mother, holding him steady. His voice was weak but clear. "She pulled me out. I would have died if she hadn't come back for me." A silence followed. The mother added, "You treat her like a tool. But she's the only one who acted like a person today." Bran looked furious, but the station commander held up his hand. "Enough. We'll review her status later. For now, she'll be locked in storage under watch." "No," Jack said loudly. Stepping in front of her, "You lock her up, I quit. And you'll explain to everyone here why a child saver gets a cage." The room grew tense. No one spoke. Eyes turned toward the commander, who frowned deeply. "We'll discuss it in the morning," he muttered. Dismissed. Back in their quarters, Ty sat in the corner, staring at her hands. They were burned slightly, wrapped now in soft bandages. Jack poured her water and handed it to her. "You didn't run," he said. "You went back for him." "I couldn't leave him," she whispered. "He was crying like my sister used to." Jack sat beside her. "You did something brave. You showed them who you really are, but they still hate me," she replied, her voice cracking. "Not all of them," Jack said, "and not forever." That night, she didn't sleep on the floor. She lay on the small bed beside Jack's, curled under a thin blanket, watching the stars outside the tiny window. A small gift appeared the next day at their table in the mess hall, a folded thank you note, and a fresh piece of fruit. No name, no message, just kindness. It was the first of many. The storage bay was quiet now. The fire was gone, and the metal walls were blackened, but standing. Workers passed by in silence. No more jokes, no more thrown food. Something had changed, but not enough. Jack stood in front of the main board in the center hub. It was used for crew notices, shift schedules, and station polls. Today, it held something different. A simple message in bold letters. Should Ty stay on the station? Yes, or nitrogen monoxide? A vote open to every worker. The result would decide her future. Some said it was fair. Others said it was cruel. Jack knew it was risky, but it was the only way to show them that she belonged. Tia didn't speak when she saw the board. She just stood beside Jack, eyes locked on the words. Her hands were still bandaged from the fire, her ears pressed flat against her head. "They want me gone," she whispered. "They still think I'm a thing." Jack knelt beside her. "No, not all of them. Some saw what you did. Some are afraid of change, but they also know bravery when they see it." She didn't reply, but her eyes shimmered with fear, not tears. Just fear, the kind that comes from years of being kicked and caged. The vote would last 48 hours. Anyone on the station could cast a vote using their ID chip, only one vote per worker, and no one could vote twice. Jack posted a second message right below it. "She saved a child, helped the weak, and asked for nothing. I stand with her. If you believe in more than just rules, vote yes." Jack Kellen, the crew buzzed with gossip. Some laughed. "He's gone soft," they said. Others frowned, uncomfortable, unsure what side to take. But something surprising began to happen. First came Malik's mother. She stood in front of the board, pressed her ID against the scanner, and selected YES. Then she turned, looked around, and said clearly, "She's more human than half of you." That night, more names appeared on the list. Quiet workers, engineers, even a few who had never spoken to Thea before. They remembered the fire, the way she didn't run, the way she carried Malik out. Of course, the nitrogen monoxide votes came too. Cray and his group were loud, mocking. "She's just a pet with a name," one said. "Soon they'll let animals run the command." Deck Jack ignored them. TA kept her head down, but every now and then, she would glance at the board and whisper the number of yes votes under her breath. Like a secret hope she was too scared to say out loud. On the second day, the voting was close, too close. 211 yes, 208 no. Jack felt the weight of it. If she lost, she would be forced off the station and probably sold again. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything. He went to the engine bay, where he rarely talked much, and stood in front of the crew. I know most of you don't care about politics or aliens or whatever this is, he said, but you all care about loyalty. You've seen me work beside you for years. You trust me, right? They nodded slowly. Then trust me now, he said. She's worth it. She saved a life when others ran. That's the kind of person I'd go to war beside. That's the kind of person we should keep. A few hours later, those quiet engine techs walked up to the board, one by one, and pressed yes. The numbers shifted. On the last hour of voting, Taya stayed in her room, sitting by the window with her arms around her knees. Jack sat across from her, watching the clock. I don't want to hope, she whispered. Hope hurts. You've already won, Jack said softly. You're still here. You've changed hearts. That's harder than winning votes. When the voting ended, the final numbers blinked on the board. YES 256, NO243. A pause. Then the board flashed the message. Decision. TA is allowed to remain on the station under Jack Kellen's guardianship. Cheers erupted in some parts of the station. Others grumbled and walked away. But the decision was made. Jack ran back to his quarters and opened the door. Thea, he said, breathless. It's done. You're staying. She looked up at him, stunned. I stay. He nodded, smiling wide. You stay for the first time. She stood up, walked across the room, and hugged him, not quick, not nervous, but strong. Her body shook as she held him, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything. Later, that night, Tia sat beside him in the mess hall. The same corner they once hid in now felt like home. Others passed by and nodded. Some even smiled. One left a sweet fruit on her tray without a word. Tia looked up at Jack, her voice quiet. I think I'm not afraid anymore. Jack nodded. You never had to be. Asterisk. The mess hall looked different now. Not in design or color, but in the way people moved. The air felt lighter. The whispers were softer. And the eyes that once glared were starting to glance with curiosity instead of hate. Tia walked beside Jack, her steps quiet but not shaky anymore. She carried her own tray now, food warm and fresh, nothing stolen, nothing dropped near her feet. This time, she wasn't crawling for scraps. She was walking to her table. There. Table, it was the one in the far corner, still partly in shadow, but now clean. Jack had wiped it down himself and placed a simple cloth in the center, a soft blue one Thea had chosen from the supply room. She sat down with him, side by side, like equals. Like friends, like family. Some workers still stared. Others rolled their eyes. One or two even left the room, but most stayed. Most just kept eating. Tia took a small bite of bread and looked around. Her eyes didn't dart anymore. She wasn't waiting for someone to throw something at her or kick her tray away. Jack saw her shoulders relax. For the first time, you okay? He asked gently. Tia nodded. It feels strange. Like this isn't real. It's real, Jack said. You made it real. Just by surviving. That day, a new worker joined the station crew. A young human named Elon, fresh from training, nervous and wide-eyed. He was assigned to Jack's maintenance team. When Elon saw Tia, he blinked. Is she allowed to be here? He asked. Jack didn't speak. Tia answered instead, her voice calm. Yes, I am. You'll get used to it. Elon blinked again, unsure whether to be scared or impressed. He sat 2 tables away, quietly watching her as she picked up a fork and used it carefully. Later that day, Jack and Ty worked side by side in the corridor vents. Ty was small and fast, perfect for tight spaces. She handed Jack tools, fixed wires, and even corrected a mistake in a broken circuit map. "You're better than half the crew," Jack muttered with a grin. Thea smiled. "I listen. That's my secret." The commander called Jack in for a short meeting. "She's doing good." The commander admitted, "Still makes some people uncomfortable, but we've seen worse workers with better papers." Jack nodded. "She's not here to make people comfortable. She's here to live." The commander sighed, "Just keep her close. If trouble starts again, I don't want another fire." Jack agreed, but inside, he knew Tia wasn't the trouble. She was the proof that kindness could change a system built on cruelty. The next day, Tia entered the mess hall. Alone, Jack was running late, and her hands trembled for a moment when she saw the full room. But she walked forward anyway, placed her tray on the table, and sat down. Someone dropped a cup behind her. She flinched but didn't run. Then, a surprising thing happened. Elon walked over and asked, "Mind if I sit here?" Tia looked up, eyes wide, then slowly nodded. He sat beside her, quiet for a while, then asked, "What's it like, being you?" She tilted her head, cold. Until now, they talked. Slowly, awkwardly, but honestly. Jack walked in 15 minutes later and stopped at the door. Watching her laugh, soft, small laugh, but real, he didn't interrupt. He just smiled and found another seat nearby, watching from a distance like a proud older brother. By the end of the week, 2 more workers had joined their table. A cook even brought her a fresh roll. "Still warm," he said with a wink. "Don't tell the others." Thea thanked him and split the roll in half, giving part to Elon. Her eyes no longer hid behind her hair. Her voice didn't shake with every word. One night, back in the quarters, Tia found something on her pillow. A necklace made from old metal parts, shaped like a tiny star. Jack stood in the doorway. Pretending not to watch, she picked it up, held it to her chest, and whispered, "Did you make this?" Jack nodded. "Thought you should have something that says you belong." Thea put it on and didn't take it off again. Not even when she slept. She still sat beside the heater when she got cold. Still curled into small spaces when the lights were too bright, but she no longer slept outside Jack's door. She had a bed now, her own space, her own toothbrush. Even a nameplate above her bunk, Tia, carved in Jack's handwriting. One evening, Elon told her, "Todd, you don't scare me anymore, Ty." Smiled gently. "Good. I wasn't trying to." "You used to," he admitted, "not because of how you look, but because of how quiet you were. Like you'd seen things no one else could understand." "I have," she said, "but I'm still here." That night, she looked out the small window in their room, stars blinking across the black sky. She touched her necklace and whispered, "I'm still here," and for the first time in her life, she believed that maybe she always would be. The mining station was cold that morning, colder than usual. Wind from the outer vents howled through the long metal corridors, shaking loose panels and whispering through the vents like ghosts. But inside the mess hall, warmth had taken root. In a quiet corner, Tia sat at her table. No longer hiding, no longer waiting. Around her were trays, cups, and workers, some talking, some laughing, all accepting. It had been months since that first piece of bread. Months since she had crouched in the corner with hunger in her eyes and chains in her past. Now, she was part of something. Jack arrived late, as usual, grease on his sleeves and a tired look on his face. Tia smiled when he sat down, placing a hot roll on his tray before he even spoke. "You always know," he said, chuckling softly. "You always forget to eat," she replied, handing him a spoon. Elon joined them soon after, carrying an extra chair. "Someone saved me a seat?" he asked, pretending to be surprised. Tia nodded. "Only if you share your fruit." Their small group had grown. not just in number, but in feeling. It was no longer Jack's table. No longer the corner where the stray sat. It had become a place people came to feel seen, safe, welcome. A few days later, the commander called for a station-wide inspection. Military officers arrived, tall, armored, and silent, walking through the halls like they owned the stars. One of them noticed TA working in the hallway, fixing a loose panel with careful hands. He barked. Identification? She froze, heart pounding. She had seen uniforms like his before on ships where kindness never existed. Jack appeared from around the corner before she could answer. She's with me. She's registered under civilian contract now. You'll find it in the system. The officer narrowed his eyes, then checked his tablet. He nodded once and walked away without apology. TA looked at Jack, her hands still shaking. They used to take people like me, she whispered. Not anymore, Jack said. Not while I'm here. Later that night, she sat outside their quarters, looking at the stars again. This time, Jack joined her, sitting down beside her without a word for a long while. They just watched the black sky together. I used to think the stars were just holes in the dark, Thea said quietly. Empty. Cold, too far away to care. Jack leaned back against the wall. And now? She took a deep breath. Now, I think they're watching, waiting for stories like mine to reach them. The next day, something happened that caught her completely off guard. A small child from the kitchen staff walked up to her, holding a picture. It was drawn with broken crayons. Messy and colorful, it showed Taya, Jack, and Elon sitting at a table, smiling. Behind them, stars, hearts, and one big word. Fail Mile. Tia stared at it, speechless. Mom says, you're nice now. The little boy said, and Jack says, you saved a kid. I want to sit at your table one day. She knelt slowly and took the drawing. Thank you, she whispered, her voice cracking. That night, she pinned it to the wall beside her bed. Her space, once a small bunk beside the heater, was now filled with little signs of life. A folded blanket Elin gave her, a tool set Jack had gifted her. The metal star necklace still around her neck. No more chains, no more hunger, no more hiding. Then came the knock. It was late, long past mess hall hours. Thea opened the door slowly and saw the boy she had saved during the fire. Malik, now fully recovered, he stood nervously, holding a steaming bowl in both hands. My mom said you shouldn't skip dinner just because you worked late, he said, handing it over. Thea blinked, stunned. You brought this for me? He nodded. You saved me. I just wanted to do something small back. Tia took the bowl with both hands, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you. As Malik walked away, she turned to Jack, who had watched quietly from his bunk. They really see me now, she said. They do, Jack replied, because you never gave up. Even when they tried to make you invisible. The next morning, Thai entered the mess hall early. For the first time, she didn't wait for Jack. She sat at the table, chin high. And when a new worker passed by and hesitated, Thai patted the seat beside her. You can sit here, she said, smiling. It's warm near the wall. The worker smiled back, surprised but grateful, and sat down. Jack walked in minutes later. Watching it all from a distance, he didn't need to say anything. TA didn't need his protection anymore. She had found something stronger than survival. She had found belonging as the station moved, as stars turned above them and the machines hummed in their endless rhythm. One thing became clear. The girl they once laughed at, the one they let starve, now had a seat at the table, and she would never be alone again.